slow derby preps, Japanese domination, and the world's best turf horse. That and more on this episode of the Win Play Show. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host of this episode of the Win Play Show. My name is Matthew DeSantis, and you can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Well, welcome to the Win Play Show, which is a program devoted to all aspects of horse racing and handicapping that is proudly part of the Trust the Profits YouTube network. Make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube so you can get all of our Trust the Profits content. We are putting something out every single day and in a variety of different ways. We have handicapping, we have betting advice, we have live betting shows, we have graded stakes previews. We're focused on international racing, domestic racing, the Derby Trail, top 10, top 25 lists. No matter what you're into, we have something for you. And guess what? If there's something you want to see, let us know in the comments below in this video, because we always try to respond to our viewers. A couple weeks ago, case in point, there was a viewer that commented below and said, "Hey, I'd love it if you did something about the Kentucky Oaks countdown. Everybody's doing these Kentucky Derby. What about Kentucky Oaks?" So you know something? We put out new Kentucky Oaks top 10 countdowns every single Tuesday now as a result. And that's been a big hit on the network. So many thanks to that viewer. And if you have another idea for us, let us know in the comments below. We love to listen to what our viewers think. Make sure to like this video and comment below with what you think is also the biggest takeaway from what was a jam-packed racing weekend. Now, before we get into that jam-packed racing weekend, just a quick note. If you have the opportunity, on Monday, there's going to be a video dropping here on Trust the Profits about a donation campaign that we're going to be doing here on Trust the Profits to help off-track thoroughbreds. It's connected with lead up to the Kentucky Derby, something that I did last year. Highlights different off-track thoroughbred opportunities and programs. And it's a chance for us to give back to the community and to the horses. There's also an opportunity for you to win a little bit of swag from Trust the Profits as well. Something that we like to do here. We like to give back. Listen, we love cashing tickets. We love giving out big prizes. We love giving out winners. But you know, there's also the opportunity for us to give back. And that's really what we're all about here at Trust the Profits. And that's what this sport should really be all about, is not only celebrating these horses when they're on the track, but taking care of them when they're off the track. And so as we lead up to the Kentucky Derby, there's going to be a really fun campaign that we're going to be doing here on Trust the Profits in the 20 days leading up to the Kentucky Derby that highlights off-track thoroughbreds and gives back to those organizations. Well, with that being said, let's dive into a very eventful weekend on the track. And let's start by going chronologically to Maidan, what we saw on Saturday. And it was much of the same song that we've seen before. Same song, second verse. And it was Japanese domination. And it started early and it kept on going until late. We'll start with the UAE Derby, where we saw Japan not only win, not only finish second, not only finish third, but that's right, finish fourth as well. The Japanese superfecta. And oh, by the way, they only had 5 horses in the race. It was absolute domination by Derma Sotogake, the winner of the UAE Derby, earns those 100 Kentucky Derby points, will be coming over to run in the Kentucky Derby. Truly amazing. A truly amazing effort there from Derma Sotogake, who took them gate to wire. Here's the interesting part. Derma Sotogake is not particularly a speed horse. If you've watched any of his previous races over in Japan, he typically stalks or sits mid-pack, but there was very limited pace in this race. The other thing is Worcester, the Bob Baffert horse, broke very poorly. It is going to get an endoscopy. It's going to get looked at. They didn't everything after the race checked out okay, but they are a little concerned about perhaps there was a breathing issue. But he really faded back after breaking poorly and then trying to make up ground and being stuck pretty far wide the whole way around. So he was a horse that was supposed to kind of be on the lead or be pretty close to it and pushing a pace. And without him around, Derma Sotogake and Dora Erode, the 2 Japanese horses, really took to the front. And they just put on a clinic, quite frankly. And Derma Sotogake, in particular, was just under a hand ride the entire way. It was never shown the crop and was just handwritten out to a 6 length victory over Dur Erede, who himself was pulled away by about 5 or 6 lengths from Continuar, who was pulled away a little bit from Perrieri, who was in fourth. So it was an incredible effort to see Derma Sotogake, a horse that, if you watch the Dubai World Cup UAE Derby preview that I did, I mentioned this is a horse that wants more distance. When you looked at what he was doing in the Saudi Derby, he wanted to go longer. He didn't want to go a mile. He wanted to go a mile and an eighth. He wanted to go a mile and 3/16. He wants to go a mile and a quarter. This is a horse that is bred for distance, particularly underneath. Derma Sotogake going to be coming over, I think, a very dangerous horse potentially in the Kentucky Derby because he's a little bit different from some other winners we've seen from the UAE Derby before. He's not a horse that's going to gun it. He's not a horse that's going to be like Crown Pride. And Summer is Tomorrow was not a Japanese horse, but Summer is Tomorrow finished second in that UAE Derby and came over that and really pushed that aggressive pace last year at the Derby. Derma Sotogake is not that type of horse. He's versatile. If there is pace, and we'll talk about that in a second, then he can sit behind that and be perfectly comfortable not pushing it. If there's nobody who wants to go to the lead, obviously he's comfortable doing that. And he's a horse that can run for days. That's pretty obvious. Dora Erede, obviously earning 40 Kentucky Derby points as well. Likely going to be coming over too. That has not been confirmed by the connections. Derma Sotogake's connections immediately said yes, they were coming over afterwards. This was a huge effort for Japan. And the thing that makes Japanese domination on these international days so much more noteworthy and so much different than European domination is that the Europeans focus exclusively on one surface, and that's turf. And if you're running on dirt, you're probably going to get the best of the Europeans, as evidenced by the fact Cairo, a very, very good Aidan O'Brien horse, who was the post-time favorite in that UAE Derby, finished well back and just clearly did not like traveling over the dirt surface at all and getting kickback, etc. So he was a complete non-factor. That's an outstanding horse, by the way. He doesn't run on the dirt. The thing that makes Japanese domination so much different is they're dominating on both surfaces. And so this idea of American supremacy on the dirt is really going to start getting challenged here in the upcoming years. We've already seen Japanese horses win Breeders' Cup events. That's just going to become more of a regular occurrence. The real transition that we're going to start to see is, I think, Japanese horses coming over, particularly on the West Coast, and running in Derby prep races, not just relying on the UAE Derby anymore. But the UAE Derby is a huge pot and a huge purse. So they're going to keep running there as well. But I think that's another factor is they're going to start coming over to Santa Anita, running in some of these Derby preps, and then coming over because then the travel is not nearly as laborious on the horse, because that's a factor. And that's been one of the main factors, I think, that a lot of people point to for why UAE Derby winners maybe don't do better in the Kentucky Derby is these are horses that are traveling from Japan to the Middle East and the Middle East to Kentucky, perhaps back to Japan, then to Kentucky. I mean, it's a lot of travel for a horse in a rather short window. So it's a lot to put on any horse. Now, Derma Sotogake was in the Middle East for a while because obviously ran in that Saudi Cup, or Saudi Derby, I should say. So was around for a little while, was acclimated. Now will be obviously coming to Louisville at some point, and we'll see how he takes to the surface in Churchill Downs. And I think it'll be interesting to keep look at. I know some people are very quick to dismiss the winner of this race. On a certain level, I understand that because of what I just talked about with the logistics of travel. I also understand that taking to a surface is a little bit different. Here's the thing, though. The Japanese are building the program, folks. They're building the program, and they're coming for the Kentucky Derby. And they're coming for the Preakness, and they're coming for the Belmont. And they're going to come for the Triple Crown one of these days. This is not just Aidan O'Brien and Charlie Appleby and maybe John and Thaddy Gosden shipping over some nice turf horses and crushing us up at Saratoga every year. This is much more than that. And it's only the beginning because, as we've talked about on this show, they're buying up the brood mares, they're buying up sires, they're taking them over to Japan, they're breeding the right way, they run the sport the right way, they have the right level of transparency for bettors, for viewers, for fans, and they're making sure that it's clean. So it is an absolutely incredible situation that they have going on over there, and it's only going to help improve the sport. Fingers crossed. It's only going to help improve the sport because it might be the wake-up call that's necessary for us to finally get our act together here in the United States and do some of the things that people have been advocating for us to do as it relates to horse care, as it relates to breeding, pedigree, as it relates to transparency for bettors and fans. It is not all that dissimilar in some ways to when the United States basketball team back in the 80s started losing games on the international stage. And we just saw it this past week where the Japanese team beat the Team USA on the baseball diamond in the World Baseball Classic. There are repercussions to these types of things. And typically, when there are these types of repercussions, America takes it very seriously. We take it very personally, and we get very nationalistic about things. That's not always a bad thing because it produces innovation. It gave us the dream team back in the 1990s in the Olympics. That was absolutely amazing. Where we said, okay, you want to try to beat us in basketball? Well, we've been playing with one hand tied behind our back. Now we're going to actually give you our best players. And it led to innovations in how we approach international athletics in professional sports and in Olympic sports. And it might end up doing the same thing in the World Baseball Classic. It might end up doing the same thing in horse racing. One can only hope that it brings about the positive change. But I'm very excited for Derma Sotogake. It was a great performance. If you didn't watch that, go back and make sure to watch the replay because it was a stunning effort from him in that incredible effort. Well, there were a lot more races obviously taking place over in Dubai than just that. The Golden Shaheen, Sibelius nosed out Switzerland, both horses coming running late, Gunite falling back, not able to maintain that aggressive pace up front, and Sibelius coming up the rail to win. This is a horse that I saw in person 2 years ago at Charlestown lose and finish, I want to say, sixth place in a listed stakes race at Charlestown. Okay. 2 years ago, this horse lost a listed stakes race at Chucktown at 6 furlongs. Now won the Golden Shaheen. Wow. Talk about a turnaround. So Sibelius, who has just been in incredible form as of late, I mean, has been running so well down in Florida and has been running well on kind of graded stakes, listed stakes races here in the United States, goes over there and just runs the race of his life. And like I said, sneaks up the rail and just barely noses out Switzerland. I mean, barely. It was very, very close. It was a photo. When you looked at it in slow motion, you could kind of tell he got there. You didn't need to look at the photo, but in real time, it looked like a photo. It was very, very tough. Tough beat for Switzerland, the 9-year-old who just kind of keeps coming and keeps running amazingly in these races, was the defending champion of this race from last year. And I have to say, if you were watching the coverage, the interview that Nick Luck had with the trainer of Switzerland, Bupat Samir, immediately after that race, it's why you love horse racing, folks. When you see somebody that emotional about a horse, his horse finishing second. And by the way, he won a whole lot of money finishing second. So it wasn't as if it was all or nothing and he, went home empty-handed. They won a whole lot of money finishing second in that race. But you saw how much that horse means to the trainer. And that's the sort of thing. I mean, he was crying. He was very emotional, talking about how much this horse means to him, how they take such good care of him, how they basically run him 2 times a year and they let him out in the field, let him out in the pasture, and he lives a very contented life for the other basically 363 days out of the year where he's not racing. But it is amazing to see the love that that horse has with the connections. And that's, again, what makes us love the sport, is seeing the jockeys, the trainers, the grooms, the people who are working with these horses who love them so much. Seeing that come through on the television always, I think, makes that much more of an impact, in my opinion. I'm a sucker for these types of things. Yes, I love this sport because of betting, but I love this story because of storylines as well. Well, let's talk about a great storyline, which is the world's best turf horse right now. And that was in the Dubai Turf, and that was Equinox. No two ways about it. Gate to wire. And wow. I mean, this 4-year-old colt who has only run 6 career races is maybe a little bit the flight line of the turf. Very lightly raced. But when he does race, oh my goodness, was it breathtaking to watch. You had phenomenal horses. You had the Breeders' Cup champion turf horse, Rebels Romance. You had a horse like Mostadef, who absolutely crushed the competition last time out in Saudi Arabia. you had both these horses chasing Equinox futilely, and Equinox was barely even asked. Much like Dermasotogake, was handridden the entire way, was never shown the crop, shook the reins, and just pulled away at will against a field that was going so hard trying to chase. And oh, by the way, set the new track record. An incredible performance by Equinox. And if you've not watched this horse run before, truly amazing. 7 career races now, 5 victories, 2 second places. Just an incredible horse that has been just getting better and better and better. It seems like every single time out. And this was the dominant performance that we were all hoping to see. Well, then in the Dubai World Cup, we saw more Japanese domination as Ushba Tesoro ends up winning the Dubai World Cup after the pace up front gets very aggressive, very contested. We talked about in the preview how Pantalas was going to go to the lead. What we didn't know at the time of the preview was the post positions. They've been assigned their numbers, but not their post positions. Remember, those are two different things when you watch international racing. You can be the number 1 horse, but get assigned post position 10. Okay. Meanwhile, you could be the number 10 horse and get post position 1. It's a little confusing for American audiences, and understandably so. But Pantalasa gets the far outside 15th post. I mean, just the worst possible place to be, and has to absolutely gun it to get to the lead. Is really challenged by Remorse and Bundug, and those 3 just really push an aggressive pace. Algiers, very nice horse sitting right behind it. Country Grammar really getting caught wide every single stage of the way. Frankie Dettori, I think, understandably was trying to get this horse hustled up a little bit and just couldn't get into a pocket, couldn't really get over to a play. Didn't need to be on the rail, but just couldn't even get over more than 3 wide, which is wide the whole way, and then extremely wide coming around that sweeping 3rd and 4th turn, and just didn't have anything left. So Country Grammar fades. Algiers looks like he's going to make the lead and be the one to make the move at the top of the stretch. He ultimately flattens out, doesn't get there. And all of a sudden, from the clouds, the horse that was sitting in last place early, Ushba Tesoro, ends up coming up late, passing everybody, and winning the second time for Japan in the Dubai World Cup. Truly incredible effort there. Like I said, an incredible day from Japan, winning the UAE Derby, winning the Dubai Turf, winning the Dubai World Cup, and all in one day. Just a remarkable day for them as they continue this march towards horse racing supremacy. So exciting day there. Very great effort from Ushba Tesoro, who, by the way, has been doing nothing but winning recently. I was a little concerned the quality of competition maybe that he's been facing, but the race set up perfectly for him. Once they had that aggressive pace, once Pantalasa, Remorse, and Ben Duke were going at it up front, it was obvious that it was going to come from mid-pack or further back, and further back was the answer there. Well, let's move to the Fairgrounds and talk a little bit about what was an eventful day at the track down in New Orleans with their 15 race card. And listen, thank you to everybody who watched Capping the Card. I think we had over 1,700 people watch. Cannot tell you how much I appreciate that, how humbled I am by it. Thank you so much. And here's the beauty. My boy Scott Shapiro and I came on. He came on and did the all stakes pick 5 with me, races 8 through 12. Here's the beauty. If you had just used my top pick and Scott's top pick for that sequence, if you put together basically a 2x5 ticket where you just used my pick and his top pick and every single leg of the all stakes pick 5 sequence, because we didn't actually overlap at all. We had 2 different top picks in every single race. If you just done that 2x5 ticket, it would have cost you $16. Would have paid off $5,450. Not bad. I gave you 2 of the winners on that pick 5 sequence. Scott gave you 3 winners. One of my favorite scratch, which I don't hold any grudges on, but an incredible sequence there in the Tom Benson Memorial. Didia, the Argentinian turf horse that I talked a lot about, ends up tracking down Adventuring in the stretch, winning that race. Didia is a superstar. She is a great horse. Get used to that name. I know people sometimes are skeptical of that South American form, maybe even skeptical of that colonial form a little bit on the turf. Don't be skeptical of this horse. To be able to win off the bench after a 7-month layoff from the last time she ran at Colonial and to win a listed stakes race against what was a pretty decent field on a turf course that she had never seen before. And that is itself a little bit funky, especially with the rail being pushed so far out and all the issues that the Fairgrounds have had with that turf. Very impressive effort from Didia. She's a horse to keep an eye on. Now, in the New Orleans Derby, Scott was right on with this one because this was all about West Willpower beating Art Collector. The top two betting choices ended up, going off and finishing 1-2, but not in that order, with West Willpower, the second choice, finishing first. Art Collector, the overwhelming favorite, really got bet down. I did not like that at all. I mean, I liked Art Collector at maybe like 9-5, 2-1, like that area, but he was getting bet down below even money. I did not like that one bit for Art Collector. But West Willpower just got the jump. I mean, that was as easy as you can say. He was on the outside tracking the lead and then he just got the jump. And Art Collector was kind of tucked on the inside, and you could tell couldn't get out, finally was able to get angled out. But by that point, West Willpower was 4 lengths clear. You're not going to catch West Willpower in the stretch if you're going to, Art Collector doesn't have that type of turn of foot. That's not the type of horse he is to kind of dazzle you with speed coming down the stretch. He's a horse that needs to be close and then makes a move and kind of grinds away a little bit. But Art Collector ultimately finishing second there. A little bit of a bounce, obviously, from that Pegasus effort, but I still thought a solid effort from Art Collector, all things considered. But credit to West Willpower for getting the job done there. Mr. Wireless, a horse that I'm always fond of, continues to gamely hit the board in these types of spots, finished third in that race. I thought just ran kind of his race and ran about to what the level of horse that he is, I thought, but did really well. Pioneer Medina, who neither Scott or I really liked in this race. I know a lot of people did, but Pioneer Medina really non-factor in this New Orleans Derby. So that was another one to take a look at, and interesting outcome there. But congrats to West Willpower, who'd been kind of banging his head against the door a little bit, finishing second a bunch to horses like Proxy and things like that, but finally got the win. And so it was good to see West Willpower in the winner's circle there. Then in the Fairground Oaks, this was the big upset that Scott gave you, which was South Lawn upsetting Pretty Mischievous and the rest of that 5-horse field, the other 4 horses. But it was really a fascinating race because it was Christian Doro and Hoosier Philly out in front. Hoosier Philly breaking much better this time, but Hoosier Philly just completely dropped anchor when they turned for home. She had nothing left, and they weren't going that fast. They were going a little bit fast, but they weren't going that fast. And all of a sudden, Pretty Mischievous, who was sitting kind of in the pocket and a little further back, makes the move, goes around. You think Pretty Mischievous has got this thing pulled away, but son of a gun, if Raylu Gutierrez and South Lawn doesn't use that long fairground stretch to their advantage and just keeps coming, and keeps gaining and gets stronger as it goes on, South Lawn ultimately wins big in that Fairground Oaks, earns 100 points towards the Oaks. Pretty Mischievous will absolutely be in the Kentucky Oaks as well. She earns 40 points. She already had a bunch from winning the Rachel Alexandra before that. So she's a horse that's absolutely going to be there on the first Friday in May with the Kentucky Oaks Day. But those two finishing first, 1-2. But South Lawn, really big upset. This was a horse that was ascending. I like this horse from a value standpoint. Scott had the guts to pick this horse up top and ultimately really came through for you in a race that, like I said, was pretty much just a 2-horse race between Pretty Mischievous and South Lawn when they turned to the stretch. And South Lawn was able to get the job done. Hoosier Philly, listen, if you've watched this show, I really hope you don't bet this horse anymore. I've not been a big fan of this horse, period. Full stop. She's just not that fast. And I don't know why people were so hyped up about her. She looked very good in that goldenrod, but it's pretty obvious the rest of the crop has caught up to her and lapped her in a lot of ways, and that she doesn't have the stamina for doing 2 turns like this. So she's just not that good. A month and a half ago, she was 11-1 in Kentucky Derby futures. Kentucky Derby futures, folks. Okay. Wild. I certainly hope none of you listening have those tickets. If you do, burn them up, throw them away, act like it never happened, and don't talk to anybody about it. But, I know people sometimes are skeptical of speed figures, but that was one where you just looked at the speed figures and you go, "What? Why is everybody loving it? Why is everybody hyping this horse? Why?" And then it's what you thought after that last effort where she bobbled from the gate. Okay, people aren't going to go bonkers. No, they bet her down to 3-5. Are you kidding me? I mean, now granted, right before the gates opened, her numbers shifted a little bit. She went off at 6-5 as a co-favorite with Pretty Mischievous. Both went off at 6-5. But yowzers, that was not a good performance. So we'll see what's next for Hoosier Philly. Now, I gave you the first leg of the pick five. I also gave you the last leg of the pick five, and that was in the Louisiana Derby, and that was KINGSBARNS. I told you this horse was pretty good, and I had a strong feeling about this one the whole way. This was one of those where I really leveraged my opinion, went off at 9-2, which I thought was an absolute gift to go off at that price, paid $11 for a $2 win bet, and I put a lot more than $2 on this horse to win. And this was a front-running effort that had a lot of people talking. Because here's the thing. KINGSBARNS breaks beautifully, goes to the front. Now, there's two horses that I figured KINGSBARNS would sit off of, and that was Shopper's Revenge from the far inside and Jace's Road from the far outside. Those two, for the reasons of their post, I figured would gun it. Shopper's Revenge guns it to get out, and so he doesn't get trapped too far back. And I figured Jace's Road, when that horse is good, that horse is on the lead and dictating the pace. Well, Jace's Road kind of guns it. Shopper's Revenge kind of semi-guns it. And they're going into the first turn, and there's an opportunity for Shopper's Revenge to really keep going. And Florent Geroux, for some reason, no idea why, decides to take back on Shopper's Revenge. And when you watch the replay of the race, the horse is pissed. The horse is not happy at all that he is being asked to rate on the inside behind another horse, like throwing his head, not happy at all. It was pretty obvious that horse wanted to go to the lead, wanted to get to the lead. And by the way, the fractions were rather slow. And we'll talk more about the fractions in a second. But even the early fractions were pretty slow that he could have gotten the lead if he wanted to. Jace's Road decides to sit off of KINGSBARNS, but ultimately KINGSBARNS gets the lead and sets insanely slow fractions. Goes 24-3, 49-3, 114-3. I mean, how do you walk the dog any more than that? I mean, just crawling up front. Then finally lets it out a little bit and starts to go and pulls away from the rest of the field. Wins easy. Earns a 95 buyer speed figure. I think what we learned from this was Jace's Road might be distance compromised because Jace's Road started fading, falling back after those incredibly slow fractions. And so that's an issue. The only horse that made up any ground was Disarm, the Steve Asmussen horse, coming second back from a layoff, who is going to head to the Derby by all accounts, according to Asmussen. I thought he ran a very nice race. I know some people mentioned he was in a little bit of trouble. I don't know how much trouble he was in. He ran a nice race, though, I thought, and had a pretty good inside trip. And then you look at a horse like Shopper's Revenge, who I thought, I don't know what Florent Geroux was doing there. That horse had one shot to get to the lead, and they decided not to take it. And I don't know what to tell you. If you were a fan of Shopper's Revenge, I feel sorry because the horse had the chance. The horse had the opening, could have gunned it, and it was pretty obvious the horse did not want to do what Geroux is asking the horse to do in a race where you could have gotten to the lead. It's one thing if it's a super aggressive pace and you go, listen, I'm going to burn this horse out if I put this horse up in the front. There was no other pace. So KINGSBARNS was the beneficiary. And yes, it was very slow. And yes, I don't know if anybody in the rest of the field really showed up other than Disarm. Instant Coffee, was exposed. And this was my concern. If you watched the early look preview, if you watched any of the things I did about this race, I was very hesitant to embrace Instant Coffee in any way. I did not like this horse up top at all. I did not even like this horse underneath necessarily. I thought maybe third, but Instant Coffee is a pace-dependent horse. And when you see those fractions, he's not closing into it. The other thing is when you're sitting dead last, you got to go really wide. You got to weave through traffic. It's one thing to do it in a 6 or 7 horse field. It's another thing to do it in a 12 horse field. The only other time Instant Coffee had a lot of problems, 12 horse field in the Breeders' Futurity. Geez, look at what happened. And so, moving forward for the Kentucky Derby, that's a big question mark, I think, for him. Now, not all the Kentucky Derby prep action was at Fairgrounds. We had some at Turfway Park as well. But listen, shout out to Wolfie's Donaghost, who remains undefeated on the synthetic after a win in the Kentucky Cup Classic. And that was A great effort there. Santon, one of my favorite horses, stumbles really badly out of the gate, went to his front two knees, almost threw Brian Hernandez off. Credit to him for staying on. Obviously, he was dead last early, ended up finishing fourth, which actually I think all things considered was not a bad effort after a really long layoff and never being on synthetic before. But Wolfie's Dynaghost at home on the synthetic. And here's the nice part, can travel from synthetic to synthetic. Went from Gulfstream up to Turfway, liked both of them, and just front running effort both times, and was pulled away when asked for more. Very nice effort there. Now in the Bourbonnette Oaks, we might have ourselves another Kentucky Oaks contender here with Botanical continuing her impressive march, now 4 for 4, perfect on that Turfway Park synthetic by a combined 25 lengths in those 4 victories. Responded every single time she was asked, challenged by her stablemate Flashy Gem, repelled that challenge and won by open lengths. She's a very legitimate contender in what is a very, I think, diluted and wide open fillies crop this year. We were a little spoiled last year with those big 4 going into the Oaks of Kathleen O, Nest, Echo Zulu, and Secret Oath. This year, we don't have a big 4. We don't even really have a big 2 or a big 3, maybe. Wet Paint, I think, is a very good horse who's going to run next week in the fantasy. I think Botanical's a very good horse. Wonder Wheel's a nice horse. Julia Shining's a nice horse, but none of them have reached that level of domination like we saw out of this division last year's crop. Now the Jeff Ruby Stakes, which was the Kentucky Derby prep race, my boy Two Phils gets the job done. Class wins out. And listen, Two Phils had synthetic pedigree. His dam won his first time out on synthetic and finished second and 2 other times on synthetic. His sire, Hardspun, produces a good amount of synthetic route winners. So there was plenty of reason to suspect that Two Phils was going to take to the synthetic at Turfway just fine. Larry Ravelli, his trainer, worked him over the surface. He's ready to roll. So Two Phils, horse I really like a lot, just turns in an honest effort every single time out. Now is actually the leading horse with Kentucky Derby points. That probably is not going to stand up much longer. But for the current time being, I think he's got 129 Kentucky Derby points. Horse that just always runs his race. Versatile, sat off of the pace, went really wide, and then just completely pulled away from Major Dude down the stretch. Rather chalky race in that Two Phils was second choice at 5-2. Major Dude, the favorite at 8-5. Finished 1-2. Fantastic again, who set the pace rather aggressively, but not too aggressive. Finished a pretty distant third, followed by Wadsworth, finishing fourth in that race. But like I said, Two Phils, a horse that you really do have to consider as a big time contender for the Kentucky Derby. Is he a win candidate? Maybe not, but he's a horse I'm included in my tickets right now. If you had to ask, who's going to be on my trifecta for the Kentucky Derby, Two Phils and Forte are probably the 2 horses I feel most confident about including on a trifecta ticket. Well, let's shift from news on the track to news out of the training barn and out of the workout track and all of that stuff. Extra on Yeho, we said last week, recorded his first work for Steve Asmussen in several months. Back-to-back works, worked out again on Sunday. Love to see that. So he's getting back into a routine. Thrilled to see it for Extra on Yeho. Another horse that makes our own Colin Sheehan here at Trust the Profits very happy. His pet, Loggins. He cannot stop talking about this horse, and understandably so. You could argue the only horse to challenge Forte was Loggins. And Mo Strike obviously beat Forte, but once Forte started coming into his own, the only horse that's really challenged him since that loss in the hopeful was Loggins, who had that thrilling stretch run in the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland a month before the Breeders' Cup Classic and Breeders' Cup Juvenile, I should say. And Loggins is going to get back on the workout track here. According to his trainer, Brad Cox, he's going to be geared towards a summer debut at Saratoga. Excited for that because this crop needs a little bit more star power. So Extra on Yeho, Loggins, getting back on the swing of things, that's good for this crop. Glad to see that. Well, let's talk about some other track news that's taking place. And if you're following racing early in the week, you know that tracks running right on top of each other is becoming just a recurring issue, and it's been happening for years. But the insistence to run races right on top of each other, I mean, with post times that are so overlapping that they need to be shown in split screens because they're happening at the same time, is just truly counterproductive for everyone involved. As a fan, it's just tough to keep track of who's going what. And you're missing races because you're watching one track and then, oh my God, the other track already went off. And so, and these are tracks that are sometimes owned by the same partnership groups. And you just kind of shake your head and you go, what are you doing? Because here's the other thing, it hurts your handle that if your tracks are going off right at the same time and right on top of each other, you're probably hurting the amount of money that's being wagered on one or both of those tracks. So it just doesn't make any sense. But inevitably, this is what we see in horse racing now. The other thing that is out there that Andy Serling pointed out, that I point out regularly, is are post times just a suggestion? Does anybody care about post times anymore? I am a sucker for post times because I'm doing a lot of things. And so if it says post time 547, then I want a post time at 547. I want them loading them in at 547. The thing is, and don't tell me about all these things that can go wrong. Here's the thing. They're trying to drag the pot, right? They're just trying to get more and more money into pick five sequences and win bet and win play show pools, things like that. That's all they're trying to. It's a money grab, nothing else. It's nothing else. All right. But it infuriates me to no end because there's tracks that can do it consistently. Amazingly, in Maidan, they were able to load them in right exactly on time. When you watch Keeneland, they load them in right exactly on time. Meanwhile, you watch Gulfstream Park, which I love watching, and I like playing Gulfstream, and I like the horses down there. I like the connections. I like a lot of the people who work at the park. But here's the thing. True story. The other day, 0 minutes to post, okay? I take my dog out for a walk because it's not a race I particularly care about. I come back from the walk, which was not brief, still 0 minutes to post. Nobody's gone off. And oh, by the way, no late scratches. It's so incredibly frustrating to watch. And that also then contributes to tracks going off right on top of each other because nobody's paying attention and respectful of post time. Again, from a product standpoint, what are we doing? It's not a good product. It's like, imagine if the NFL, if one game just like kicked off at like 1:30 instead of 1 o'clock. And then, it bled over into the 4:30 game. Oh, well, you can't see the start of that game. No, like every other major sport, everything goes on time. Not horse racing. And so very frustrating. Obviously, there's instances where there's late scratches that can delay things. Understandable, totally understandable. But you tend to make that time up then by the next race. Again, not in horse racing. If you get 2 or 3 minutes off, by the next race, you're 4 or 5 minutes off, then you're 7, 8 minutes off. It never ends. Now, let's talk about some good news. And there is good news because Pablo Morales, the jockey who I told you might have lost his finger last week and was having surgery, had a successful surgery. Looks like he's going to be able to keep his finger. And he actually was able to finally figure out what happened. He was bitten by the horse next to him in the starting gate at Tampa. Was bitten by the horse next to him, looked down. He saw bone on his finger and, very scary moment, obviously, for him. But sounds like successful surgery. He's posted a lot of pictures from the hospital, looking like everything's good. Status is updated. So excited to see that. Good for Pablo. Happy to see that he's going to be doing okay. I mentioned earlier what Florent Geroux is doing on Shopper's Revenge. The same could be asked, what was Florent Geroux doing in general at Fairgrounds on Saturday? Because aside from the questionable ride he gave Shopper's Revenge, he also got demoted in 2 other races that day. I believe 2 of the first 4 races on the card got demoted. So it was a rough day for Flo, who I'm not as down on as some people, but sometimes when it's bad, it's really bad. And Saturday was not one of his days that he would submit to the Hall of Fame committee for consideration. But a jockey at the Fairgrounds who is doing great things, Raylu Gutierrez, wins the jockey title for this meet at the Fairgrounds. Always a huge fan of Raylu, so thrilled to see him win that. That's very exciting. And then Ron Fichot gets leading trainer, even though Brad Cox wins a huge percentage. Fichot obviously has a higher percentage of higher number, I should say, of horses being entered, wins the training title down there at the Fairgrounds meet. So congratulations to both Raylu and Fichot for their respective titles there at the Gulfstream Park, or at the Fairgrounds meet, I should say. Now, what do we have coming up this week? Well, we got the Florida Derby. We're going to have a lot of content around that. We got a lot of content around the Arkansas Derby as well. But here's the thing. A lot of the content from me is going to be coming out Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, because Thursday, myself and El Hombre from Trust the Profits, the 2 of us are heading down to Gulfstream Park. That's right. We're going to be at the Florida Derby. Hope to get some content for you while we're down there. Post it on the page. If you're going to be at the Florida Derby, though, reach out. Look for me in my cap. I'll always be wearing it. Come up, say hi. I'd love to chat. Love to meet people who love horse racing as well. Engage with our channel. So we'll be down there. But Colin Sheehan, the Formula, the rest of the guys on Trust the Profits, they got you covered for the rest of the week here on the channel. Well, that's going to do it for today. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace, and I'm here to wish you a great and prosperous day at the races. Remind you that it's now post time.